Now, of course, you can't talk football without talking about quarterbacks. And yet again, as it seems like is always the case during NFL draft time, the quarterbacks were the storyline of the night.
I think it's disgusting. I don't understand what the heck's going on with this. Fifth player on my board. It's never happened before in 47 years where a player that high has dropped this far into the fourth round at quarterback.
Before we dive into this year's quarterback class, let's take a look back at Bleacher Report's April 2024 mock draft and see how these quarterbacks stacked, and then we'll take a look at what actually happened this year. Bleacher Report's mock draft last year had 4 quarterbacks mocked in the first round, with Shedeur being in the first at pick 3, followed by Carson Beck. Obviously, he didn't enter the draft this year, Jalen Milroe, and Quinn Ewers. Now, obviously, as we all know, with the number 1 pick, the Titans selected Cam Ward, and we all knew that was going to be the case ever since the Titans locked up the number 1 pick by being the sorriest team in the league last season. We saw how the Will Levis experiment went, the Malik Willis experiment before that, and obviously the Titans have a big glaring hole at quarterback, and they believe they found their guy in Cam Ward, and I tip my hat to them, and I wish him nothing but success with Brian Callahan. With Cam Ward going number 1 and another quarterback not being taken until pick 24, there were obviously some guys who expected to get their names called early on that didn't. And obviously I'm talking about Shedeur Sanders. A number of mock drafts had him mocked at that pick 2-3 range, either going to Cleveland or New York. And ultimately, we didn't see that happen, and we saw the so-called quarterback slide. Now, I want to just take a second, put a pin right there, and talk about quarterback slide. I think we need to reframe the way we talk about the draft, especially when it comes to a player sliding. Because when you think about it, when you look at these mock drafts, when you look at all these draft rankings, these aren't the actual teams putting these together. These are people in the media. You know, obviously they have their insiders, their insight, things like that. But a mock draft and actual perception of guys are two totally different things. And in Shedeur's case, we kind of saw this start to bubble. The closer we got to the draft, we saw reports come out of some teams have Jackson Dart ranked higher than Shedeur Sanders. Some teams like Tyler Shuck. Even though all of this information was coming in, we continually saw Shedeur get mocked between those 2 and 3 spots, but obviously not falling past 9 where the Saints were picking. While, yes, he might have slid in a media sense, in an NFL sense, we never know what their true read, what their true perception of a player is. So if the league saw Shedeur as a 4th, 5th round pick from the beginning of the process, did he really slide? And the reason I make that point about a slide is because I feel like once a slide happens, the media does its best to decide why that slide happened. And in the case of Shedeur, we see it in a sense of they're pointing to his interviews, pointing to Deion being his dad, pointing to everything except what he put on tape on the field. And if you ask me, Shedeur was my 2nd-ranked quarterback. I don't think he should have fell that far. But obviously, like I said, these NFL teams see things differently, see what they like, what they don't like, et cetera, et cetera. We saw what he was able to do this past season at Colorado, really these past 2 seasons, bringing a program to relevancy that it hasn't had since it went to the Pac-12 championship game years ago with Steven Montez as quarterback. That's real ball knowledge, by the way. So when talking about Shedeur's production in college, all the things he accomplished across his tenure at Jackson State, his tenure at Colorado, but for the media to look at this slide and say, oh, it's because of his interviews, oh, it's because of his dad, oh, it's because of all of these things, to me, it's just asinine. The draft is about, in my opinion, the NFL is a merit-based business. The draft is about what have you done, what have you produced, and obviously there are character things that go into it. But for a guy like Shedeur, who I had 2nd in my quarterback rankings, for him to fall all the way to the 5th round was a big head scratcher to me. And that goes along with some of the other quarterbacks in this draft. You look at a guy like Quinn Ewers, who I said was mocked in the 1st round by Bleacher Report in their 2024 mock draft that came out in April. He fell all the way to the 7th round, pick 231. The last quarterback taken, Quinn Ewers had to see guys like Cam Miller, North Dakota State, Graham Mertz. Let me say that name again. Graham Mertz and Riley Leonard taken before him. To me, I just think sometimes when we get to the drafts, GMs overcomplicate things. For example, Quinn Ewers, a guy who was number 1 coming out of high school. I know that doesn't matter now. But his first season in the SEC, 2nd team All-SEC, leads this Texas program to the college football playoff, plays some damn good football while injured, I might add. Falls all the way to the 7th round, and I think NFL GMs need to take a step back and look at what we're doing when we're evaluating these quarterbacks. A lot of times the words traits and potential get thrown around. But to me, like I said, the biggest thing is production. Shedeur, Quinn, all guys that produced at the highest level. So to me, to see those guys slide in particular was particularly dumbfounding, bro.